This is a DeMarie Productions podcast.
What type of creativity do the kids have? Because Frankie really got me with the trash taking.
Oh
the trash out.
with the guns. And everything.
It's so cute.
Yeah, he's got ADHD.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, and so he's got this thing. One of my best friends in the world, who just moved to Seattle, by the way, from Brooklyn, has ADHD, and they have that like engineering mindset. He will build you give him like a Lego set, and he will spend 4 uninterrupted hours building fucking Legos to make some kind of giant thing. But you say, "Hey, change your clothes and brush your teeth," stands in the hallway and stares at the ceiling. You know what I mean?
Right.
He has like scripted energy or like deep focus creativity, right?
Right.
Not like free form as much as like Lucy does. Lucy's with the big imagination with like all the fucking dolls and the American Girl.
She's more into like imaginary play, like scenarios and stuff like that.
That strong imagination and ability to pull things and like entertain yourself and make scenes and storylines in your head. She's much more verbal.
Yeah.
Frankie's much more like in it.
Kid
immersive.
creativity is some of the purest creativity.
You and I talked about this yesterday, like the propensity to almost shut yourself down. It's like angel devil, right? Yeah, you're like, oh my God, great idea. What's the business strategy? Like kill, right?
Yeah.
So like rather than snuffing it out all the time, like you're prone to do as an adult, no different than
you
like
just kind of roll.
Dancing. But yeah,
there's no
like,
limits or boundaries or anything.
No,
like that.
they just fucking go with it. They don't care who's around. They don't care if it's interesting or not, right? Like they just fucking go with it. Yeah, I don't know when we lose that. It's when you start to develop like a sense of other people around you and like, will this person think I'm cool or will this person think I'm weird? Yeah, for sure. As you notice more of your community, the insecurity creeps in. And I think it's like 6th, 7th grade, if I remember.
Is it?
I think. I mean, Lucy doesn't have it yet. She's in 4th grade, right? They still have, they're all like still like pure. All her and her friends. She has one friend this little gay boy who is, he comes over, he's got his black Uggs on, right? Carrying his iPad under, and he's like, I'm going to need access to your Spotify account. It's like,
does he know he's of the
No, and
community?
I would never say that. I just mean it is fucking hilarious. It's like clueless level of gay.
Aww.
Like, I'm going to need access to your Spotify
Again,
account.
Pure.
Exactly. Unencumbered
nobody's
in any
bullied
way.
him yet.
No. In fact, he stayed over. We had like a 6-person, all girls plus
I should
this
be
person.
clear, you haven't bullied him yet.
No, that's right. I'll wait till he gets older to bully. How was your week?
My week was good, kind of like uneventful.
Yeah.
Not every week is like filled with action. I think that I'm in an interesting space with business, to be honest. Like I'm definitely in a hustler phase. I'm pitching a lot right now, which can be exhausting, but there's like a gamification to it that I enjoy and like having success with it. Like I think that I'm building interest from a few new clients. So yeah, I'm excited.
But today's topic is around creativity.
Yeah, creativity is an interesting topic, and I'm really excited that we're talking about it specifically and separate from inspiration because I think that there's so many different types of creatives.
I'm curious.
Yes.
We talked about this. I'll just say it as my opinion.
Sure.
But like money corrupts creativity. Money stifles, stymies, redirects. So for me, they're very different sides of the brain.
I think that the relationship between inspiration and creativity are so closely. And if I am feeling stressed or anxious about other things, mainly money, creativity ain't going to come so naturally. And I think that that's a pretty common thing.
So should we cancel the episode today?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. I'm not that stressed. But like it's one of my favorite things to discover about people is like how creative they are.
Like being funny. You should never be the one to say, hey, by the way, I'm super fucking funny.
Right.
I don't know. It's one of those innate abilities or traits that like if you're a creative person, you don't need to fucking tell everybody.
But also somebody else will probably identify it in you first.
Sure.
Like you hear a lot about
game recognizing game, right? Like,
well, or just like advisors. Like you hear a lot about like mentors or teachers. They encouraged me to go be in the play. They encouraged me to pick up the instrument or the camera or something like that. It's usually like a mentor who can see it in a kid.
Yeah.
That's why I think like talking about kids is actually so interesting when it comes to creativity, because if you don't identify it in a kid like at a young enough age, they could bypass those career opportunities later on because nobody ever told them that, hey, you have a knack for this.
Yes, that's true. Now we're getting to so many topics about like, and we're going to talk to David later about like the ability to work in creative and what that means. Like a lot of kids don't know. I did not know that. I did not know that.
Even after starting the production company, realizing that selling creative was separate, then like it's a separate line item. If a client wants you to also actively engage in the creative process, that is different than just producing their existing in-house creative.
Yeah.
And honestly, at first I thought it was ego, but it's really just confidence to be like, no, actually, I have the mind. set for creativity, I'm going to charge for that.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I'm also backing up a little bit. Like, I think why I take umbrage with people who are like, hey, hi, I'm Frank, I'm creative or whatever, right? Is because it's such a compliment. I'm just picking on you. But it's just such a compliment to be. It's something that I want to be thought of.
I admire.
Creative. People want to be thought of as funny,
For
right?
sure.
Those types of things. It's almost like so fucking arrogant to be like, hey, I'm creative. I think. I like when I happen around it. I like when 50, I find 50. It in conversation. Like when I start to talk to somebody and I don't know much about them in the beginning, I'm like, oh, now I see where we're going with this and where we're getting to. I like.
But if you got it, you got it. And I think you should be proud, or at least like confident enough, like I said, to value it.
Okay, but at this point, don't you feel like there's some ways that it's sort of lost meaning? Like there's so many people out there that are like, I'm an old man shaking my fist at the cloud.
Sure.
I'm a digital creator. Everybody's a fucking digital creator.
But you
right?
can still tell the difference between somebody who's doing it well or has got a creative like angle to it, and then people who are just calling themselves that. Same thing with, we talk a lot about commercial photographers, and it's like, as soon as the smartphone came out, everybody had a camera and everybody became a photographer. But you can tell the difference between Jamie's Instagram from Ohio and Tony Kelly or some great photographer.
Totally. I just feel like if it was the crux of my career, I'd feel a little shit on by other people.
Well, you're in an interesting position because you hire a lot of creative people.
Yeah.
And so are you finding that there's more of a pool to pull from, or that it's become more difficult to identify good creative because there's so many people saying that that's what they can do?
I think on the whole, the people that I'm hiring today are far more creative at their age than most of the people were, like myself at my age. What I think is different is it's like fucking needle in a haystack now, because you put out a art director, copywriter, whatever. Everybody's a fucking copywriter. Everybody's an art director. How many people have stood over your shoulder like Video Village and been like, oh, you know what you need to do? Move this, do that. We'll talk to David about this. But like everybody's got a creative opinion. And so anyway, to answer your question, it's become way harder to find the deeply skilled talent because there's just such a broader market out there of people who consider themselves creative.
Yeah. Like when I'm in a room, like at a dinner party, and like a real creative person is there, and I say real because we're going to talk about the difference between what you and I consider like a commercial creative person, somebody who's doing it purely for hire, and then somebody who's like born with it, who has that creative energy and that vibe. And when you like go to a dinner party, to me, it's like, sit me next to that person, because that energy gets me so excited. And a lot of people come to me with like creative ideas and asking to produce them, whether they be films or TV shows or podcasts. And I've had to learn how to say no, because I get so easily excited by people's passion around creative and their ideas. For the longest time, my response was yes. And like, how can we make this work? Now I'm realizing the business side of my brain is kicking in of like, what's going to also be profitable? Like what's going to be a commercial success? Because in order for me to give more opportunities to other creatives, I do have to think of the business side of it. And there does have to be a payout, which it doesn't, I think it just makes me be more critical, but I don't think it makes me like more harsh. Well, it doesn't like make me feel negative about the variety of people that are creative out there.
I consider myself a commercial creative. I am not like like somebody who's just born with amazing creative talent and energy. I absolutely am not. I think I've sort of skipped like a stone across lots of different parts of my career and been good enough at each of them to do it for that time.
What are the different titles that you've had in the business world that you've held that are in the creative space?
Well, I started as a graphic designer, TV guide back in like late 90s. And then it like moved up into creative director. I worked in production in between there, like just straight up production, like paper sourcing, printing. Like straight up production, and then creative director. And I did that for a bit before jumping over the fence into like creative operations.
So what is the job of a creative director?
I mean, that's immense, right? Like where I was, it is very different than the job of a creative director at like some of the places that I've worked at since, and some of the ones that you know. But like at the time, it was to make sure that the brand carried through every touch point. For every photo shoot we did a lot of visual merchandising. It was a jewelry company. Ugh, it was really bad. It was my entry into New York, and it was really fun to be able to do that and to be able to hire creative teams and work with agencies to breathe new life into ideas that we had sort of like stalled out on our own. So it was really interesting for me at the time, but when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, what fucking JV talent I was,
well, whatever. It
yeah,
was
I
the
know.
beginning
No.
of your career.
Yeah,
So I'm
yes.
curious. So when you get hired in-house at a brand, a creative director's job is what?
Well, I mean, a creative director's job more than anything is to carry through the DNA of that brand onto everything it touches. So everything from like a poster for the HR team, right? Like its employee brand, its brand,
Yeah.
commercial brand, consumer brand. And so every bit of it should be about like brand governance, and it should be about like maintaining the look and the feel and the tone of voice and all
Yeah.
the aspects of the personality of that brand.
Like this is where, again, we go back to the idea of like a commercial or corporate creative. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've been hired as a creative director or been working as in some sort of creative capacity for a company that you don't necessarily connect to the product.
I knew that was going
And
on.
I'm just curious, like, how do you force it? Like, how do you force that or justify or, how do you make that happen when you don't feel like a authentic passion for the product?
Yeah, look, if you get to in your career feel an authentic passion for the product or the brand or both, like good on you, and never let go, because
that's
the
rare.
majority. Yeah, I'll just say in my own experience, it's rare. Like you get hired where you get hired, you get the opportunities, you get the exposure, you get the autonomy at those companies. Like I had the pleasure, I suppose, or the good fortune of working at Chipotle during some of its heydays, right? When it was like 90% brand spend and we basically didn't need to do any marketing. And I wasn't like a huge part of that machine or anything, but that we were doing like one act plays and all the work with Pixar and, Fiona Apples. And I mean, it was an amazing time to watch, but you don't get those opportunities. Those are very, very, very rare. More often than not, you just like, okay, I work for a company, it sells widgets. What's the most fun I can have in this little sandbox here,
It's got to be hard. I have to imagine when you're sitting at the table and you have to prioritize like what is great for the brand over what's the most creative choice.
I mean, that was the story of my career. Like shit on so many times on my little ideas. I was like, how do we make this more important? How do we become more than just like this laden cost center in a business, and moved into like, well, let me sort of, my real talent, if I have one, is mediating between like, let's just say the suits and the creatives, right?
Right.
How do we get this idea far enough that they'll buy it? And how do we get enough autonomy from them that they're like, we trust you a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like there's been a couple times on set where you advocate as best you can for the creative side more than what's like best for the business.
More than
even.
the business, yeah.
Because sometimes like if you have a home run creative, that is what is best for the business.
It is. And I always feel like, well, I'll explain that away later. And like, maybe it's false confidence, right? But I'm like, oh, when I have to go back and sit with these people who, can sometimes be like a little
about the numbers.
Yeah, a little
on the
humorless,
business.
a little narrow, like exactly what they're meant to be doing. It is very difficult for them to see the other side of this and how it's like, just really strong for the consumer, really strong for the brand. Projects we've done for brands that we've done them for have elevated and what's the word, like catalyzed those brands in like really big ways, like step change ways.
Yeah.
Going from like, some ticky-tack stuff that was happening in the beginning to like, no, we're bona fide now. So
well, it's interesting with like, speaking of like the work that we've done together, when influencers or celebrities will say no, even photographers will say no if the creative core of the idea is bad.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of businesses have a hard time understanding that because they think a check is a check. Like you should participate with us because we're paying you, and don't you want money? And like it's not just about that.
Yeah.
Like there's such a abundance of influencer or celebrities these days that are being approached constantly by brands that my favorite are the creatives and the content creators that are saying no to stuff because it doesn't align with their creative vision for what they're trying to do or how they're trying to establish their brand. It's an interesting thing where I like that it's kind of collectively being elevated, that brands have to have good creative in order to get top tier talent.
Yeah, and it's funny. We come from this two different sides, and you're more forgiving than I am. When it goes back to like what I look for when I hire in creative, I look for people that are generally like tried and true collaborators, like wonderfully creative themselves, right? But not so insecure that it's like, wait a second, this is my idea and it can't be bastardized and we're not budging from it. I'm talking about somebody who's like, I had a great kernel of an idea and the room is going to help me amplify
collaboration
this, right?
and creativity is huge.
Yeah.
I think like some of the best projects that we've been in and that I've done independently, if the vibe is right amongst the team of creatives, because I think that there's a little bit of creativity in everybody that I hire on a crew that's doing something, whether it be a commercial or a film or what have it. I think like everybody has to creatively show up or be in the mindset of a creative person where it's like, we're going to try shit and half of it might not make it. But like the fun part of being creative is exploring collectively in collaboration. You know what I mean?
You're going to love this because I say it all the time. But it's like improv. It's yes and, right? Like, and I want to come to like the sensitivities and the downside of being a creative, especially a commercial creative, how it can be like a real shit career for a couple of reasons. But like the idea of improv with a really good group who is open and, you know, fairly secure as much as a human can be and all that, that always produces the best work, always. When you come with an idea that you're unwilling to take feedback on, you're unwilling to help be amplified by others, that's when it just sort of dies on the vine. Those are creatives that don't work corporately. But I will say, and it's more of a question for you maybe, is like the personality that it takes to be a creative on your side of things. Like how do you know if you have it if you don't?
Like when I'm looking to hire somebody?
When you're looking to hire on your side, because I'm on the brand side and I can answer that pretty easily.
Well, you know what's funny? Sometimes brands will have a creative idea in mind, and then they'll ask me to help find a director, let's say, or a photographer to execute the existing creative that they've established. A lot of in-house like executives, I think, will only rely on the creative's portfolio to justify the hiring because they need to see a one-for-one that this director or photographer can execute exactly what they have in mind and prove that they've already done it.
Yeah.
Whereas I look for the personality of like, I don't need to see it in your book. I need to understand that I need to see that you have the technical capabilities, but that you're excited by a creative idea and like it's an energy flow for me. Like if you come at me with like, here's how I was thinking, and it might be a no for the director or for the photographer because we do have to meet certain brand guidelines, but I'm not going to just hire the person who's done exactly what the brand wants before. Or if it's a film, I really am looking for the excitement and the energy behind that a creative can bring to the table about how they would interpret what we're trying to achieve.
You and I had one of those. We interviewed a female director. She was fucking amazing. Her idea, which was a really great idea, I'm not going to say it, but her idea, which was a really great idea, wasn't the idea we needed for this campaign. And I remember like sort of massaging it with her on the phone to see if I could sort of pull her over toward this way. She had like a sincerely solid idea, and I would have loved to be in a position to be like, let's do that instead. Right? But in the end, it was like, this is crushing me, Frank, but I don't think we can say yes to her.
For Mindy.
She was amazing.
Yeah,
she was really
she
fucking talented.
Vibe.
She had a great reel. Like everything she did looked really beautiful, like really cinematic and all the photography. And I was just like, we're shooting a comedy kind of with Mindy Kaling, right? Like just different.
This is the thing. Like this is why David is such a good person to talk to about all this, because to me, he's an authentic, like creative person that can put the corporate hat on and execute against a brand's needs. But him and I have had a long-standing kind of creative collaboration that I find very fulfilling. So he's somebody who I think can speak to both sides of like the types of creatives that you and I deal with most often. So shall we?
Let's bring him in.
Cool.
What do you think of being on this side of the camera? Do you do this ever?
Mark?
No,
Never.
it's very weird.
Is it weird?
Yeah, but I'll get into it. I'll be fine.
I think there's a little bit of like a star in every gay man.
Bill, Mike.
Maybe if I had a wig on.
Would you like a wig?
Yeah,
We can get that
exactly.
for you.
If I was in like a full beat and a wig, that
Sort of
would be
like
a different
hide.
story.
That's very real. The confidence of drag is like very real.
Well, the confidence of any kind of mask, right?
Or like costume
like
or-
even when I wear sunglasses all the time.
No, even a hat for me.
Yeah, I have the hat on.
there's a
That's my
reason.
security baseball cap.
You're here. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for doing this.
Tell me how you guys know each other, because I've just met David.
So David and I first met because we had approached a company that he was working at to direct and help produce a project that we were working on at Dee Marie, and David was the director of that. I remember like being very like, David's cool, and like wanting to befriend him. Luckily that happened. And yeah, we started doing a couple commercial projects together. And then a few years later, David was the director of Copyright Infringement, which is the documentary that we released this past year. And ever since then, it's been just gangbusters. I find a lot of comfort in working with you, and I it's like a really comfortable kind of creative collab. That's how I think about it.
No, that's really sweet. It's funny actually because the first thing we worked together on, which was like a while ago, we worked on a sizzle and it didn't go. And so like my sort of experience of that was like, oh, like this wasn't like that successful a partnership. Like I liked working with Frank, but I was like, I directed a sizzle. The show didn't sell. I don't know, like a few years later when you reached out to me about like working together, I was like, that's so weird because here's this person being like, I really liked working with you. Let's work together again. And in my head, I was like, well, why would that person work with me again? Like we didn't sell the show. I didn't do my job right, I guess.
No, but so we were just talking about that, the value, maybe even a greater value in the ability to collaborate, right? Like just finding like minds and then sicking those like minds on a project. It sounds a little bit like that's how this happened.
I think like it's pretty easy these days to identify like, and there are going to be times where David isn't the right person to collaborate with on a project. But when you find that good energy, like it just makes things go more easy. I mean, we spend so much time on set, right? That it's like, I want to be able to have fun with the person and trust their creativity. And I think like when I really fell in love was like seeing your creative mind and relying on it. There was a time during the documentary where I was in a panic because I thought it was the first time we had both done a feature documentary of this level. I thought like cameras on everything. There was an incident that happened and the subject of the film was in a tizzy. And I was like, we need to like capture this. And it was just like no fault of their own, but I thought this will be good for the film. And David was the one who was like, you know, it doesn't really help us tell the story that we're telling. I don't think we need it. And immediately I was like, oh my God, you're totally right. Like I'm panicking for nothing.
I had the same sort of realization the other day. I was just watching regular old plain TV, but I was thinking, and you talked a little bit about this, when you were doing all that BTS and putting together like more reality versions of things, do you already have the story in your brain? Are you crafting the storyline as you go? Or are you like, let's just get it all in the can and we'll figure it the fuck out later?
I mean, I think it depends on like the particular project. When I was doing the YouTube stuff for JLo, I feel like it was a little bit like cameras on all the time. But there was just so much going on and you kind of never knew like where the story would emerge. Like, she, you know, she was going on tour, she was working on movies, and there was just like a lot of stuff to capture. And you kind of weren't sure like what the most exciting piece or like what the story you might want to tell like that week or multiple times a week or whatever it is.
How'd you get that gig? How'd you get into that?
I worked in-house at a production company. I left that job after a few years. I mean, essentially they wanted me to move to LA. I didn't want to move to LA. And so it was sort of like we were going to part, which was a little scary because I, you know, like left it was a nice, stable, creative job. And then very, very graciously, the CEO and founder of that production company, or that company as a whole, because they're also sort of like, they're a production company and agency, she connected me with Jen's producing partner because they were looking for someone to sort of like handle YouTube. And, you know, like they really kind of wanted like a one-man band person. So it was like I could shoot everything and edit everything and sort of like come up with the ideas and stuff. And so they connected me. And then it was like a really quick thing. Like I met her producing partner is Elaine Goldsmith Thomas, and I met Elaine in New York. And then like a day later, I was on an airplane to go meet Jen and her manager, Benny. And I think just really to make sure like I was like not a weirdo. They were gonna like let me into their life.
Comfortable with this person.
Like this person can be in my home, or like.
I remember when you were launching the YouTube, like I was tuning in. Like it was well shot and it was also incredibly like insightful. And it did feel like, oh, here's somebody who's actively investing in the YouTube kind of type of content for the first time that I hadn't seen before. So it was wonderful. And it also was just like a really entertaining time of her life, like particularly.
How do you approach that differently to say like scripted work? Or I'm just guessing because I've never done it, but are you more like studious in your scripted work? Like I know I'm, you know, when I go to set tomorrow, I need to be remembering this and this and this, and I have notes. Or is even that a little bit more organic for you?
I mean, I think with scripted work inherently, you're a little more prescriptive because there's material that sort of like needs to be accomplished. So, you know, it's like I want to go into the day sort of having a sense of what we're there to accomplish. And also like set can be so chaotic. And so I find it really helpful to be like, one's brain kind of starts to scramble a bit, like the longer you're there. And so it's really helpful to be like, I know that if I leave with like these shots and these lines on camera and this coverage, regardless of what my brain is telling me, like the thing will exist when I leave here. But I will say, like, I think working in like BTS content, doing unscripted stuff has really helped, both like with scripted stuff as well, being more flexible, like kind of wearing it like a loose garment. Cause I think like I have probably a control streak in me, but like when you're following someone with a camera and you don't know where the day is going to go and you're not really in charge of that, you sort of have to learn to sort of like let go and just sort of go with the flow and see what happens and kind of like stay on top of it and be able to pivot. And I think that that's a really good skill kind of like in all elements of production. And so I think like one work kind of helps to inform the other.
When did like the idea of being a director like first come into your head? Like, did you always know that you wanted to work in film?
I don't know, like I like to paint, I like to doodle, like I engaged like an imaginative play. Like I was sort of like that kind of kid.
Yeah.
I think it was like in 4th grade. I was in science class. We had to do a presentation on like one of the body systems. So like the respiratory system or the vascular system or whatever. And like
in the 4th grade?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's 5th grade.
That feels really advanced for 4th
It was 4th or 5th grade. And like everyone was going to do like, poster board, like whatever, like diagrams
Yarn
of
or
things.
whatever.
Yeah. And I honestly don't know how the idea came to me. I'd probably have to ask like my mom, but I filmed like a video where I got in costume and I played like a talk show host named Melvin Finkelstein. And like I was doing a science show about the system. And
she had a vision.
You couldn't tell me that it wasn't the greatest idea, but I was also kind of nervous. And then like it was received really well, like both by my peers and like by the teacher. And so then that positive reinforcement of like, oh, when you kind of like follow a creative instinct, people like that, or people thought it was funny, or people, I got a good grade, and I wasn't like that good in like math and science in school. So like also like doing well was like a new thing.
David's like, I see a bigger performance here.
Yeah. As a kid though, you also know like, oh, this landed well. Like this got the response I was looking for. Or once you get it the first time, you're like, I want that again. And then you start to kind of maybe go down the path of like something creative. The addiction.
Yeah, totally. Sure. And then like I did little things like that. Like I was obsessed with the Charlie's Angels movie. And so I wrote a sequel in like 6th or 7th grade. Premise was essentially like in the first scene, the angels die. And so,
dark.
Yeah. And so they had to like recast them, but they had to look exactly like them.
Okay.
So that like this network of supervillains wouldn't know that the angels were gone, because obviously then crime would spike.
Of course, classic.
Obviously. And so I wrote this script, and I remember renting Charlie's Angels from Blockbuster, and I like filmed the screen of the TV for like the intro.
Yeah.
And then like I cast kids like in my class to do it. Like I found all the prettiest girls, like one had brunette, like one was a redhead, and like made them be in this movie. We'd like film scenes like during recess.
Yeah.
And so I think like that tells you, like but I still don't think I didn't see that as a career path like modeled for me.
Right.
And then when I was in high school, a teacher suggested New York Film Academy had like a summer program, and I did that. And I remember having like a very clear aha moment where we were like in the auditorium, and the staff and like teachers were introducing themselves, and they were talking about what they did professionally when they weren't teaching this course. And like they were screenwriters, they were editors, they were directors.
It's
and I was
so
like,
helpful to see that when you're a young kid. Like
I was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
you can do this as a job. I was like, I just think this is so fun. I couldn't believe you could do it as a career. And then after that, it was like hyperfixation. Like I was only going to do that.
Beyond helpful. I didn't know that those things existed. I thought you got to a point in your life where you're like, okay, I don't draw on paper anymore.
Yeah.
Or I don't whatever, right? And so now into the big world, and I have to use numbers and charts and Excel to find out that there are people who are food stylists and prop stylists.
Oh,
and,
totally.
And like all the roles, like you're like, holy shit, I can
recently
keep doing this.
Went home, and my dad made me like after 15 years of asking, like clean out my childhood boxes of crap, basically. And I found that I had drawn myself onto the cover of a Time magazine, but as like the world's best actor, or
Very
I think I may have said director,
Very on brand.
but which is very on brand now looking back, but I didn't know what a producer was.
Yeah.
So of course I was like, I know film, but then I just like wrote in like world's best, the thing that I knew. It wasn't until later that I knew what a producer was in like high school or something like that.
Yeah.
And then thought maybe that's the path. So, but I definitely knew like creative as a kid. I was like, oh, I'm going to probably end up doing something creative.
Did you have a moment where you were like, this is what I'm going to do professionally?
Well, I wanted to be an actor, like is what I thought. I wasn't like into the craft of it. No, I wanted the attention. Like I was like into the
You're
like
not an
applause.
actor.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that like being a producer is a very creative thing. I think being an entrepreneur is a very creative thing. It takes a lot of creativity. And so I've always had the mixture of both business and creative.
For somebody who's not born with the same sort of propensities that you've just described, can you train? Can you train your way into being a creative person? Can you learn
That's
it?
interesting.
Sure. I think there's a lot of like skill and craft and creativity. So it's like it can be something that's like fostered. I think everyone is
Nurtured.
creative. I think most people aren't supported or don't have that nugget or that seed. Like kids are inherently like full of imagination and possibility. And so I think that those seeds can be fostered into like creativity in all forms. And that doesn't mean that you have to pursue it as a career. Sure. Like, you know, I think it's important to have hobbies too and things that like are fulfilling in other ways. But yeah, I don't know that it's like some unique thing that like only a select few are born with. Like, I don't know if I feel that that's
I think
true.
that's freeing to hear though, right? I know there's times when I struggle, or even just getting into ruts and you're like, this will come back. Like I have to get the environment back.
Oh,
and
creativity.
Right?
Now as an adult, it is not there 100% of the time.
She's a fickle bitch. She visits when she wants.
Gaga always says, like, you got to honor your creativity when it's there. But nurturing kids who have some sort of creative spark, I think is so critical. Because it takes a lot of self-confidence, I think, to be a creative person. You can't necessarily rely on box office or Billboard charts or these external validators. Like when you're vibing and you're being creative internally and you connect to that, I think like that is the biggest motivator to keep going with being a creative person. And that is something that if you can like help a kid understand that from a young age, that I think is like God's work. You know what I mean?
But there's still a line that we straddle, right? And maybe a question for David is like, how do you toe the line between keeping personal projects afloat? You live in like a very expensive city. We all do, right? And like, how do you manage to pay the bills and figure out, you know, when you can do your next? And this is as much for you, Frank, right?
Oh, yeah.
The sort of one for the real, one for the meal, right? Like, when do I need to like, I just got to pay the rent on a few of these.
Comes up all of the time.
Well, it's really hard, I think. I don't know that I've yet learned like how to strike the perfect balance. I mean, necessity comes into it a lot. In my experience, like production is like can move really slowly. So like when it comes to passion projects, it's like I can be working on parts or pieces of developing an idea or trying to bring something to life always in the background because it's not like, oh, I have an idea. Great, I have funding. I'm going to make a movie. And so I think like, you know, in some ways maybe different if it was something more like tactile, like painting, like I would need to be actively doing that thing always to be working on it.
Right.
Or I don't know, maybe you're meditating on the thing. I won't speak for painters. I'm not a painter. I just did, but I won't. And then I feel very lucky that I get to do this thing professionally. And part of what that looks like is I'm doing versions of that work that pay me to do it.
And it's tough, right? Because I think all of us to a degree like rely on our creativity for our income. And so it's hard when a job's opportunities don't come our way. And so we're not able to exercise or express our creativity. And then you do start to get invested in these personal projects. But I find that the personal projects always take a back seat when the next opportunity presents itself. And so it can be a struggle to, I think, balance both personal and professional projects because the necessity of rent's due. Yeah. But that's where like the most rewarding projects are ones that you can authentically connect to creatively and they pay a good check.
But I'd also say like when things are slow, like when work is slow and I don't have as many like paid gigs going on, I think it's harder to be creative. Like the dead space is harder. One, because I think I am creatively fueled and fulfilled by doing commercial work. Like it's different, but it's like that also like energizes or like fuels the flames of creativity, I think. I think when that stuff is like I'm in a rut or a dry spell for work, then it's harder to be creative because I don't feel like that energy is like not being nurtured in the same way.
It's like a muscle that you work on. That part I totally identify with. Like even just doing stuff that you're not particularly proud of in the moment gives you enough of an idea of like what not to do. It's like a negative example of like, we'll get this one done. We'll finish this project. But wouldn't it be cool if we did this maybe next time? Start to spin off on other ideas.
Are you guys ever in the middle of a project where you're like, I am not bringing my A game? Or like feeling any sort of insecurity of like, there's so many times where I'm like, I know I'm not thinking the most creatively, like I'm not optimizing this to the best that it could be. And it's frustrating. I don't know if it's because of the timeline or the budget or whatever it is. It's like, I'm not able to get there sometimes on creative projects. And it makes me feel a type of way. I don't know if you've experienced this.
Well, 1,000% for me, right? Like I think creativity is like an intangible. You can't just, it's not like, got to get in my math brain today, right? Or like it's a skill. And there are other things out there that are like this, but to do it as a profession and just have to get up in the morning, regardless of what happened on your commute and like grab it off a shelf and be like, okay, cool, we got to put together some really like wild shit today, it can be a really tough thing to do. You know, it's like asking yourself to be in a particular mood all the time, at least for me. So I wonder, like, where do you guys go to when you struggle? Like environment, headspace. Where do you go to when you're
Like,
really
do you have a thing
trying
that can trigger your creativity?
The honest answer is I think it's not doing anything. I think like if I'm trying really hard to like trigger creativity, I feel that it feels further away from me because I don't think it's something that you can like, there's no like A plus B equals C. And so I think like if I really feel like I'm in a creative rut, it's like sort of helpful to be like, I put it down and I walk away and have the faith that like, it's not a pie. There's not like limited amount. It'll come back and it does. And it feels really uncomfortable to do that. But in my experience, like, yeah, sort of like being able to do nothing and sort of like exercise some amount of patience and then find other things to do to like keep me busy. So I'm not like hyper fixated on the fact that like I'm being patient. Like I'm not doing anything. I walk the dog. I read a book. Like, I just do other things. And it's like.
David is an avid reader. I don't think that there's anybody that I know that reads more than David.
Well, Cat Williams, but then David.
Yeah.
Yeah. He reads like 3,000 books a week or something.
I
Have you not
personally
heard
know
this
him,
already?
But I know this man right here.
Okay. Well, anyway, he's second to Cat Williams.
Does reading help inspire you? Like when I read a book, if it's a good type of book, which I love, like a CEO's book
like,
or something like that.
yeah.
I like an autobiography and stuff.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll be reading it and then I'll get so motivated that I'm like putting it down and then I'll reread the same page like 6 times because I just get stuck and I immediately want to leave the book and go and execute or go and do something.
Mine is the exact opposite.
Really?
Exact opposite. So like reading something like, do you know Haruki Murakami? Right? Like Wind Up Bird Chronicles or something like that. It's so ethereal. It's so different than my life that I get off in this kind of like passive mind meditative state without even realizing it. You just get caught up in like somebody's really doing a beautiful job of painting a picture through words. And now my brain is over there and then shit just starts to become a little bit more clear in my real world. So it's less direct of being like inspired by somebody telling a great story as much as like, it's like a nursery, it's like a fairy tale distracting me so that I like stop being on your bullshit and things will start to flow again.
That's how I feel. Like I mostly read fiction and like I find that it's like a form of meditation because I'm engaged with the material. And so I'm not thinking about myself, which is like key, I think, because it's like so easy to swirl about and sort of like self-obsession. Like, why am I not doing this? Like, why hasn't this come to fruition? And so it's a way for me to get out of my own head. And I'm just like, I'm reading something and that's what I'm doing. I mean, sometimes I read a book and I'm like, wow, this would make a sick movie. And like, then I'm like, should I be, working in narrative film more or something like that. But like for the most part, it's just an activity that I like because it's like, it feels meditative. It's like it's not connected to something I'm trying to do professionally. There's no reason to do it other than the fact that I like to do it.
That's amazing. I feel like everything that I'm doing has to tie to somehow advancing a career or a potential profit maker.
No, you need hobbies, babe.
Yeah,
you're gonna burn out.
I mean, I play
lot of
tennis.
pressure.
Sure, okay, fine. But then, like, I don't feel like I'm gonna become a tennis player. But I'm probably on the thing thinking, like, it'd help or make this better. Like, why has the tennis racket? Like, I am kind of going to ideas constantly.
May not apply to you, but what it makes me think of when you say that is when one is just pushing too hard. Like when you're just like, I have to make this into something. It's like the fear of getting started in writing, or I'm not a painter either, but like whatever your craft is, right? You're just like, I just got to put my bullshit aside and just get going. Just like start walking and you'll eventually get somewhere.
To that point, it's kind of the opposite for me where I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like I like that part of I like my creativity. I get a kick out of my creativity. 90% of the time it's fucking ridiculous. Like the shit that I'm thinking about that I think could be a fun idea. But then like there are some times where these things will come back. To be honest with you, the film that we did, I had been thinking about that probably for a year before I even put the first foot forward on doing it.
Yeah.
I have learned over time that I don't need to invest in every creative idea that I have because that has led to a lot of misspent money, to be honest with you. And
Some
again,
red
like
herrings
learning like how other people now come and pitch me ideas to get involved with. And I've had to kind of slow up on what I'm willing to do. Same thing with my own ideas. I'm like, welcome to the party idea. You're going to have to wait 6 months. And if I think about you again, then we'll have a conversation then.
What I like about that too is like the timing thing. Like, I'll speak for myself. Like, it's easy for me to like have the idea, and then when it's not like coming together like in a timely way, to like feel really frustrated, or like to feel the instinct to like dump it. Like, okay, that's like, but I think like with the documentary, it's like such a great example, because it's like one of the things that I'm always trying to work on is like, you just don't know the timeline of things in general. And so often like they come back around or come together in a different way. And like none of the cool things or things that have been the most fulfilling in my career were like by my design. I couldn't have architected my career for myself. And so it's like, I still try to do it all the time, but it's like helpful for me to like take the step back and be like, I couldn't have planned any of this, and I didn't. Things do come together and in weird ways. Like, okay, like we worked together all those years ago on a thing that didn't go anywhere. And then like that built our relationship to like working on this movie, and like separately, like I had been wanting to do.
I thought you were saying the film hasn't gone anywhere, and I was about to slap you.
No, like the sizzle didn't sell. And so it was like, but that relationship, it like laid the foundation for us being collaborators. And like separately, I'm like wanting to do this documentary. And then it's like, you're like, hey, I have an idea for a documentary. And so it's like, I couldn't like tell you how that was going to come together, but then it does. So having some amount of like trust or faith in the process, and that it's not my timeline, I also think,
and
is
not
like
being
really
linear.
helpful.
It's not a concurrent series of successes. It's a lot of kicks in the dick in between to put you in a different direction to go realize a success that you wouldn't have otherwise.
There is and I'm not the biggest, like most woo-woo of people, but there is some sort of like divine faith or path that I align with, that I'm like, I would be kidding myself if I thought I could step by step plan this out and make this happen. But I believe I'm meant to like be a creative person and a producer, and that like I'll have a certain level of success. I like believe that. And I think that like creative people, when you're not like a doctor or a lawyer or a very studied, and you're in a very known industry where you're going to grow a certain way, or like a career path, right? We talk about people who have like 9-to-5 W-2 people, like you have a trajectory that you know you can achieve. Creative people, your career could go left, right. Like you're open to much more career risk. You have to have some level of faith that like this is what you're meant to be doing, and that you're going to have success in it.
A healthy amount of delusion.
1,000%.
I mean, I was going to actually ask you guys on your side of it, just call it the like brand side and the external side. I'll tell you on the brand side, and I'm curious if this rings true for you. It can be a very draining, sometimes like a shitty career path in the respect that like, you know, I didn't think I would get beat up every day in my job, you know, and like ideas assailed or the ideas of a team I'm representing or something like that. Sensitive people naturally gravitate more towards like creative pursuits, right? And so therefore you're a sensitive person now in the middle of this business that sometimes doesn't care about you or your idea. And when you get shit on like day after day, as can happen sometimes, does it feel like that on the outside as well? How do you guys deal with that? Or are you just like, I fly above all that?
I don't fly above it. I think exercising creativity and putting it out there is like extremely vulnerable. So I think like you are sort of like a raw nerve. I think it's really hard to just be like, okay, well, I've developed a thick skin. I do think the skin thickens over time, and you just get better at not taking personally. I also think like part of like film and production is so collaborative. It's not mine. Like it's ours. And so I do think that that helps a little bit, because it's like, for me, I feel like I can be sort of not defending, but it's like I am advocating for a collective work versus like, because it's not about me.
Which there's like an honor in doing that, right?
Totally.
Like representing a team and honoring an idea.
Yeah. And so I think that helps like remove the ego a bit, because it's like, it's not my thing, it's our thing. And so also sort of trusting that like, the rejection doesn't mean like it's, you know, sometimes it is you, but a lot of the time it has nothing to do with you. And
I think that like one of the things that I think my job is as a producer is to create an environment on set where everybody who is a creative feels comfortable and confident, and that they are supported and have what they need to be able to fully realize their portion of the project. That to me is a very important part of the job. Yes, everyone's going to get paid, and logistically it's going to be a smooth day, but I also hope to create an environment where everybody feels like they can show up and really explore and have fun and collaborate. The other point that I was going to make was like, I think that a lot of creativity and wanting to be able to execute, if you're showing up on set and you're starting to throw out some brand new ideas, like you're a little late to the party, you kind of have to know when to introduce your idea or a creative thought. And sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to put that in the back pocket because this is not for this brand. This is not for this client. This is not for this talent.
Or just
that is a good
up.
idea.
Yeah.
Go pitch it somewhere else. Go take it somewhere else. You know what I mean? Because this isn't the time or the place for that idea to come to life.
Yeah. I think you learn that skill over time and experience, right? You have to fuck up a few. How was it? I mean, all this theory we're talking about, you two did work together. Yeah. What was that like? You traveled together, I imagine, right?
David's like it was horrible. Yeah, didn't allow me to be creative.
I'm curious to know, like, how was it working together?
I feel very lucky to get to work with you. I don't know, you extend me a lot of trust, and it's so flattering because it's like you, like as a producer and also like your personality, it's like you're so invested in this thing, like you care so much. So then for you to relinquish any control to extend trust to me is like, yeah, it's very humbling. It's very flattering. And then it's also like that inspires me to like want to do great work.
So it was a good experience. I haven't seen the whole movie. I saw the sizzle and it's amazing. It looks really, really good. Truly.
It makes my job easier as a producer when I can completely trust somebody.
Yeah.
And when I can just say like, this is why you got the gig. Like we've already passed the point of having to prove yourself. Like now we're in a collaborative mode where it's like, we've both mutually agreed to show up and bring our thing to the table.
You run a pretty tight ship sometimes to the point.
Well, that's the other thing is that I am very quick to micromanage. Like I'm very quick to just like drop the please and thank yous and get into the work.
I've been on the business end.
Sorry, yes, I understand that part of my personality.
And I tell you to back off.
But I love a collaborator that's like, okay, bitch, like back the fuck up.
Right.
I think that there's a time and a place for creative ideas and collaboration. And then there's a time to like execute and do the job.
We were on set together and I had to basically quit in front of like 500 people on the phone, right? On a Zoom call. Nobody in the company knew that I was leaving other than the senior management. So I had to be like, hey, my time here, blah, blah, blah. And the company I worked for. And I was like kind of rehearsing like 7 notes I was going to go over. And Frank's like, is this the best place for us to sit? Let's move you to a green room. And I was like, motherfucker, I am on edge right now. And you want me to change location?
I relied on Bill and I's friendship in that moment to be like, I know that you're not going to be offended by this.
I was so fucking stressed out.
But that was me phrasing it in a nice way.
I know.
Do you know what I wanted to say?
I know. But I'm saying that's like,
out.
Even for me, you manage, you run a tight ship. Yeah, that was funny.
What other things did we want to get into?
Do you want to talk at all about like, I mean, I don't want to go into commercial creativity, but like how you approach your work. If I want to be working in directing like TV commercials and that sort of thing, how do I get into this? How do I meet clients? All of that sort of.
How much of your time is spent pitching yourself or ideas or trying to assemble a team around something that you want to create or, pitching yourself to a corporate brand?
Entirely too much. Yeah, I mean, a big part of the job is sort of like reminding people that you're out there so that they think of you, that your name comes up in rooms and you get hired for stuff, and kind of like trying to extend your network so that like that pool of people who are thinking of you for jobs, kind of continues to grow.
I'll say though, on my side, it does. And I wanted to help that a little bit because on my side of it, when you guys met, right, and your first sizzle didn't work out and you went away and you were like, I can't believe Frank called on me. Like, it is so critical, just the interaction. Forget the ideas, forget the project goes forward. Like next time I'm up, I'm like, I'm calling David. I'm going to call David. Like that was a good conversation and we can talk to each other. It's why you and I work. Because I could be like, I can just say some shit to Frank. The budget I thought I had shrunk by half, right? I can't just go to anybody and say that without really like fucking up relationships.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I'm like, I know I'm not everyone's producer. You're buying into the vibe and the personality just as much as you are into the skill and the capability. Part of like self-promotion and constantly pitching yourself, like I think that's got to get easier once you have a body of work that can speak for itself as a director.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, overall, like in a macro level, it gets easier. One, you start building up like a bigger body of work. And so like any skill or any muscle, it's like you're developing it over time. On the flip side, I think when I was younger, I had like more delusions. I was not afraid of anything. And so I would send an email to anyone. I would call anyone. Like I just wasn't afraid of that. Now, as I've gotten older, I'm like, I shouldn't do that. Like, who would I be to do that? I also think like negative self-talk can like always creep back in. And so it's like, I don't know, like my husband constantly has to give me like pep talks, like, and literally like list out like my resume for me. Cause it's like, I'll be like, why? Just like, I haven't done anything, you know, why would they hire me for that? And then he's like, well, actually, you haven't done nothing. Here are some of the things you've done. Like, I'm very lucky to have a person who can sort of like do that.
Phil, why don't you do that for me?
I know, I was going to say, like, it is
Phil's
really
like, you're
important.
right, you've done nothing.
But I think like,
Thanks for the call, Frank.
Yeah. You had to text me that out of nowhere, Bill? Like, Jesus, I didn't even ask you.
In case you were having a good Sunday.
Bill's just like, you've done nothing.
You've done nothing.
yeah, like I think that remains hard. I don't know if that ever goes away. I don't think it does. I was recently talking to someone who, I don't know if this is true, so, because it's like a person told me a story about, but that like Steven Spielberg still like gets nauseous on his way to his like first day of set, that he like throws up on his first day.
I totally believe that.
I'm sort of like, if that's true, like that's crazy from like as an outside perspective, because I'm like, objectively sort of like a master of cinema who doesn't love Steven Spielberg. But at the same time, I'm like, but of course, because every time you're gearing up to do it, it's really scary. It's daunting. You know, you're setting out to do something great. And also in some ways, like the more visible it is, like the higher the stakes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think
Stakes
that like
is
you
high.
have to sign on to this type of career path in those moments, like giggle that like, this is part of it. Like even the self-doubt of it is like, oh, here she comes again. Like after you've done it for a long enough amount of time, you see patterns. And like when creativity is not there, and instead of going to lazy or whatever I did when I was younger, I just know that it's okay. The switch is off. Like you start to kind of manage yourself a little bit differently, I think, as the career goes on, to not let the self-doubt and the negativity creep in, but rather just to honor that like this is part of the whole career. This is part of all of it. And this is just like an icky part. You know what I mean?
I think also for me, like something that's really helpful is like having a network of friends and people who are like also, regardless of what they do, like that they're also creatives, like kind of like working in the space, because it feels very isolating to be in like self-doubt by yourself.
Yeah.
And it's easy for that to sort of go to the place of like, well, it's me.
Yeah.
It's like we had dinner not that long ago, and basically the purpose of that dinner was like I was feeling down on myself, and it was helpful to talk to someone, because then they're like, yeah, like it is hard. Like, you know what I mean? You're not alone in this thing.
Yeah.
That's like a really important thing, that like when I feel myself starting to like take, you know, be on a downswing, is like I reach out to people and I'm like, hey, do you want to get coffee? Do you want to chat? Because I'm not really asking for anything. I'm not like, hire me for a job. It's really just like the
Support.
commiserating and the support is
the
so
more
helpful.
successful you get, one gets in their career, the less people assume you need it or want it, when in fact it's the same amount or more. Stakes are higher. The Steven Spielberg story is like, this guy's like, I'm Steven fucking Spielberg. I can't fuck this up. You know what I mean? It's probably nerve-wracking for him.
There are times I know that you know a ton of creative people, but like my friends really do inspire me. Like my actual friends who are creative. My friend Sydney is an incredible artist, and like watching her journey, scrolling through her Instagram, or just like meeting up with her if we can, like she inspires me. Like she is so creative, and she's somebody who isn't seemingly stressed out by her creativity. And I'm like, that is good energy to help refuel or focus me. Is there anybody in your life or your life, Bill, that you like can go to or that you identify as like, oh, I'm inspired by your creativity?
I mean, similar to what David said earlier, like there's a few people in my life that are just really good validators. Both they're easygoing, much more. I'm more high strung, right? Secret. They're easygoing, and they will help to just through conversation. Not like here's a list of my personal accomplishments level, but more like just the validation of what we've worked on together and like friendship and all that time. That it makes me feel like okay, it's not so bad. This will all come back around.
Also, because you talked about it, I think like the scrolling and seeking inspiration from other people, like I really think that that's so valuable, because I think the flip side of that, like sort of the scarcity mindset of like jealousy creeps in, like, oh, I want to have their career. Why is it my career doing the things that they're doing? And it's like choosing to see it as like their success is proof of concept. I am seeing them have a career that I might like to have, then it's like that's proof that I can, because that career trajectory exists. Rather than seeing as they're doing it, that belongs to me. Why don't I have that? I hate that person.
It's a very mature perspective, right?
I don't embody it every day.
No. We all
today I'm able to say it.
You want to know like a secret? My latest thing is when I watch a movie, I will watch all the credits down. And what makes me feel come back to like, I am good, I'm doing okay, is if I can see people in the credits that I have also hired. So if I can be like, oh, you worked on a great film that I just fucking loved, I've hired you too. It really does hype me up and make me feel like I'm okay. I'm on the path. Like I'm not where I want to be right now, but I'm getting there, you know?
Yeah,
I'm working amongst the people that I also admire.
Those petty jealousies, which do naturally creep in, are so tied to like somebody else's version of success, a brand or a company or a paycheck or an audience or whatever it might be for the medium, that you're right, you can get easily caught up in that shit. And I absolutely still do, even at my age, get caught up in like little petty jealousies and shit. But the more you can celebrate others, the more I feel like that just generally comes back around to you in some way anyway.
Yeah, it's not that I'm like jealous. I'm just really competitive.
Yeah, oh, I didn't mean that.
No,
Sorry.
I'm just saying for me, it's not, I don't go to like a jealousy mindset. I'm very competitive in like a fun way. Like I'm like, oh yeah, you think you're just because you announced your thing, like wait till you see what I got coming, you know? Yeah. Like I try to really avoid the negative mindset as much as possible when it comes to the career and creative endeavors. You must have been in situations where like you have to swallow your creative pride and prioritize doing something that's a little bit more commercial or corporate because that's the client directive. Talk me through like how you deal with that process.
Yeah, I think like when you're hired to work on a commercial project, I think for me, the key is like I psych myself up or trick myself into caring about it as much as if it were a passion project. Because I think like I can't do good work if I'm like checked out or I don't care or if I'm like feeling like I'm above it somehow. The truth is I'm not. It's like how I'm able to do what I want to do. And it is the thing I want to do, which is like I get to be paid to be a director and I'm being paid to be a director. So it's like accessing that is like really important. And I think it comes back to like the collaborative nature too, is that like I'm on a set full of people who are all like amazing at their job. This incredible prop stylist, this incredible hair and makeup person, this incredible cinematographer. And like that's really exciting. It's really energizing to be around a group of people who are all amazing at what they do. Most of them are skills that I also don't have. And even from the client perspective, it's like, yeah, sometimes like, you know, they give you creative and they're sort of like, this is the thing, go execute it. Like being a gun for hire, is it the most thrilling thing ever? Probably not. But at the same time, like oftentimes like they're so excited about the idea because someone they report to is giving them the green light to go make this thing. Yeah. And so you're like on the call with them or you're in the meeting with them and they're so excited. They think the idea is so clever. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, I get very moved by that because I know what it's like to feel so excited about an idea.
It's very sweet of you.
To have someone.
I'm the person on the other end of that phone, by the way, like me and my teams or whatever, right? Teams I've worked on.
The last thing I just want to say is like so much of being a director particularly is like bringing a vision to life. And so it's cool, no matter what the vision is, getting to do that. And so for someone to sort of be like, here's this idea, it's your job to like execute it and bring it to life. It's like, that is really fun to do. And so it kind of doesn't really matter. Yeah. And then, like, obviously, like, then when it's done, I'm not dwelling on it as long as I might with like something that like I've been working on for so long or something that's like super meaningful to me on a personal level. But for the period of time that I'm working on it, it is the most important project that I'm working on.
For me, if I'm not connecting on a paid project with like the story that we're telling or the things that are easier to typically connect to creatively, I will like inevitably on any set that I'm producing, a gaffer or a grip will come up with some rig or come up with some way to light something. And I am always like, that's fucking smart. Like that is so creative. Like, so you can find it. You kind of just have to be in the mindset to like look for it, other people's creativity.
Open for it, open to it. And I mean, each of what you just said, I think is why you guys will continue to get hired by these brands that will pay for all of this, because that's what we look for on the other side. You know, the amount of work that goes into before we ever meet your characters, right? Like internally, you're like, oh my God, we finally got budget to do a thing. Oh my God, we might be able to do it on this product. We came up with 19 ideas and they're like, well, I want to take 5, 6, and 12 and smush them together and pitch us again. And we have to send it up the chain. Yeah. Then finally you have an approved idea and you're like, oh, who's going to do this for us? Who's going to help us bring this to life, right? It's so stressful on the brand side too. And then we come to you guys and we're like, a little bit hat in hand. We're kind of proud of our idea most of the time, but we also know that we're like an in-house team and we're a little bit small ball and you guys are the pros and we're trying not to.
At agencies too? I mean, they're probably super excited about their ideas.
Agencies have the benefit of like their chief output is creativity, is creative, right? It's strategy, it's product. Like our chief output is like selling widgets. And the idea that we get to do
At
it
any
in
brand that you've worked at.
any brand. I mean, look, it's modern day capitalism, right? Like sell more burritos, sell more food bowls, whatever. The idea that you get to do that, like, okay, they gave us a little bit of money to go do a creative way of selling these widgets is already like, you know, here's the keys to the car. Don't bring it back, you know, with an empty gas tank. The brand has given you such trust. And we haven't even gotten to you guys yet who will immediately amplify those ideas.
Out of the three of us, you're the most like in-house on the corporate side of creativity.
I worked very little on agency side.
But you're on the corporate side of creativity is what I'm saying. How do you feel? Like, how do you feel as somebody who I think is genuinely creative?
Yeah.
Do you wrestle with the fact that you've landed in such a corporate lane in life?
I don't. I am a commercial creative.
You're cool.
I'm okay wearing it. Neither particular pride nor shame, you know, like I just do what I do and I get to do a cool thing to make the money that I make, you know? And I think, am I a creative person? I'm creative within the boundaries and the confines of a structure. And then I can usually find a way to go left when everybody else goes right and make a better thing of it. But am I like blank page creative, like the way that you guys are and other friends that I have? Absolutely not. You know,
you're just being humble.
No. I'm really not.
He already said earlier that he doesn't like when people say that they're creative.
I know.
So we're supposed to mirror back to him that he is.
Oh, David is learning me. But no, truly.
Her down.
My skill has been like, Frank, the ways that we've worked where we're like, we're going to try a thing. Let me go. I got to take this to a bunch of people and make sure that we can still do this thing. Maybe that's a bit of a producer in a sense, you know?
Well, it sounds like the three of us need a project. And I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Let me go get the project and we'll get David on a call.
David, you're the best. Thanks so much for having this conversation with us.
Thank you for having me. This was so nice.
This is really nice. Great to meet you.
Really appreciate it. And we'll list all of where people can check you out on social media and hire you and all that good stuff.
Hire me.
Please.
Hire me, please. Yeah.
Cool.